So this webinar series grew out of some discussions that I had had with a dear friend of mine, Allison, who is also living with metastatic breast cancer. And we realized that there's this untapped, maybe not untapped, there's basically a need to have conversations about what happens at the end of life and in how to prepare for that. Because those of us who are living with metastatic breast cancer, we're terminal, and that time of transition is coming sooner rather than later for us. And I have always found that whenever there's a difficult subject or a difficult experience coming up, understanding as much as possible what is going to happen, even in broad terms, makes the experience that much less scary, that much less daunting. If we can break it up into palatable bite-sized pieces. And so that's kind of what we've been doing with these webinars, is breaking up that transition, breaking up that big, scary idea of death into the pieces that we can control, into the pieces that we can assemble into our ideal passing, whatever that is. And that's going to be different for everybody. But we've explored anticipatory grief, talking to your children about death. We've explored palliative care and hospice care. We've explored caregivers looking back, and we're going to be doing more of that in 2021. But today is our last webinar of 2020, which is kind of amazing to think about, that we're going to be celebrating the new year here this week. And I'm super excited to have Valerie come back. As some of you might remember from a couple of weeks ago, Valerie is a death doula. She's also the host of a radio show. And I know that she's going to talk more about her perspective and experiences with death, walking through that process with people. And we are also joined by Christina from The New Narrative. And she's going to talk about memorials and doing that online, but also how that looks now that we're living in an entirely new situation here. And I'm really excited to see she's got some slides and some pictures to share with us. So very excited to have you both here today, and thank you for giving of your valuable time. Valerie, I'd like to start with you. If you would just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about, what is it? Exiting Gracefully, your nonprofit, and your radio show, and whatever else you want to talk about in terms of being a death doula.
Sure. It's not a nonprofit. I don't want to falsely have that out there. I wish it was. No.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Donations. So I have been a nurse for over 20 years, and pretty much all of my career has been in some capacity with others at end of life, specifically hospice, for the past 17 years. About 2-3 years ago, I decided, oh, well, I'm an LPN, licensed practical nurse, and I felt that I needed to pursue getting my RN degree to stay relevant in the hospice world. And it was right around that time, I was halfway through school and kind of hit a wall, and I feel as though I've outgrown traditional hospice itself. And with all of my experience and connections and things like that, I fell into this end-of-life doula training, and didn't need to be an RN for that. It's actually a non-medical role. So that just changed my entire world. Did not finish RN school, but life has been very amazing these past 3 years with all of the connections and people, and just really promoting death literacy. It led me to start my radio show, Mortal Musings, and really just an end-of-life advocate, mentor, educator, all of those things. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to reach out to folks who want to learn more, and using this wonderful avenue that you all have created to have these conversations when we're not in a crisis. You used the word terminal earlier, and your reality, terminal, that definition, is unfortunately, we're all terminal, and we choose not to have these conversations, and you know, and life can change in a moment, which I'm sure you all know. So again, why not hear these things, you know, when you're in it, but before you're in it, because it's going to be everyone's reality at some point in life. So yeah, it's just really appreciative of this avenue, and for you ladies having come on my show. And I guess, Christina, you'll be next. I can't wait to hear about your stuff.
Let's do it.
I love the term that you used, death literacy. Would you define that for us? Because
Sure.
I think that that's really key in what we're talking about.
Sure. Really just understanding things that everybody should know. Again, planning, being prepared. We plan for births, we plan for weddings, you know, the baby showers, the gender reveals, all those fun things leading up to an event. And, you know, we just don't treat death the same way, and which is unfortunate. Even especially with our elder population and our, you know, just the seniors, you know, it's pretty real, you know, when you're in your 90s. But so then you're making choices and decisions, you know, under pressure during grief, like you talked about, anticipatory grief, and all of the things that we cannot avoid. It just compounds the stress when there's things that we could have taken care of ahead of time.
Thank you for that outline, Valerie. I think that the idea of death literacy is really what we're doing with this whole webinar series, which started with 7, and yes, I'm now scheduling at the end of March. So I'm happy that there have been so many people interested. I've gotten tons of comments from people about how now they know what to do when. Maybe they're not quite ready yet, but at least they're starting some of those conversations, which I think is so key. And Christina, I'd like to come to you, talk about what New Narratives is, and how did you get into doing this whole online memorial thing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have I'm rooted in the event industry. So Valerie, when you were talking about like the baby showers and the weddings and all the fun stuff that you plan for, and then nobody's planning for, you know, like a 250 person event that you have to plan in 10 days or less, which is what I was doing a few years ago. So pre-COVID, we had a death in the family. And I think I told you, Abigail, the joke in the family is that I'm Italian, and I was voluntold after my uncle had died. We're all very close knit. And my mom was like, you have the events background, you know who to call. Like, we need, you know, of course we need all this stuff done, and you're the person that's going to take it on. And I was happy to do so. And like the skills were a natural fit. But then afterwards, I realized how important it was and how needed it was for families to have this resource that's event-based, understands budgets, understands how to, you know, like set up, take down, AV, everything. And just like that one-stop person that can really be there to accompany your family throughout all of these decisions. And especially when, like I said, you're having to do these 250 person events in 10 days or less, and you have all these little details, and the funeral directors are fantastic. And there are really great ones out there. And essentially this is very similar to a funeral director's role. But what I like to compare it to is if you're getting married and you're going to a wedding venue or going to a caterer and asking them to help you plan your wedding. It's, you know, they have their own facilities to take care of, and they're coming at it from their own approach, and they may not have the time to give you to, you know, for very individualized, personalized, customized service. And I work directly with families. And so pre-COVID, of course, I wasn't getting that much business, and because, you know, it's been slow to kind of promote this new way of thinking about events and about thinking about memorial services and going really out of the box. I find, to Valerie's note about just how communication has changed in general, one of the lines that I keep saying is, partially from my friend Megan Carmichael, is like our iPhones have changed more in the last 5 years than our funeral customs and traditions have changed in like the last 100. And people like,
Wow.
it's just being that accessible, you know, like you can do things your own way. You can have the event at a banquet hall with like two stages, which is the one I did an event for a musician last year in November where there was 500 people, 2 different stages, one for the ceremony and then one for a jam space. So we had a different, like a musician schedule, and everyone was encouraged to bring their instruments. And of course, like, you know, a little logistics for that, but we had all of the instruments, all of the equipment, had a full ceremony for him. There were like 500 people. It was great. Like I worked closely with the venue managers to do that. And just, it was a true celebration of his life. And I remember they said that he wanted, before he passed, he of brain cancer, I believe, but he wanted it to be festive, and he wanted it to be a nice celebration of who he was and how he lived his life. And so there were clients like that, and other clients where they just needed some help with the logistics, and I stepped in to help there. And then of course my favorite one was the very first one I did, was a woman who loved everything about the 80s. Specifically, the World's Fair was here in my hometown of Vancouver, BC in 1986, and she wanted an 80s celebration of life. And that's what she had. And it was like a full bar, lots of great speeches, a live band, $600 of takeout pizza delivered at 11 o'clock at night. And just like, wherever your family, and I started this with like our philosophy is we want to come into this with a blank notebook and an open mind. So wherever you are, wherever your family is, whatever you need help with, it's like we're there to listen and to kind of in the back of our heads, we know exactly what needs to be done, but it's up to our conversation to decide what to do and how to help you really be creative in arguably one of the most uncreative times of your life. Like you're going through all this grief and you know, your world has been shaken upside down, no matter what your relationship was to the honoree or to the deceased. Like it's, you know, everybody's in a different spot. And so just having someone to bounce ideas off of and to help guide that process along has been really helpful. And then of course, March happened, March of 2020, and everybody was asked to stay home and shelter in place. And I think early in March, I had my very last in-person event at a church close by for a local family. And then at the beginning of March, my friend Allie from LifeWeb 360 and I got together, and we were just like, everybody's going to be using Zoom or a virtual platform. Like we need to figure out what the easiest way to do it is, how to help families transition, like how to get them logged on, different creative ways that you can do this. And for the last eight or 9 months, I've been working as New Narrative, and I've also been fortunate enough to work alongside a company called Gathering Us. And the two companies, they do interactive memorials, and it's more than just a one-way live stream. It's really, we'll work with your family to develop those little touches, like the music at the beginning, and we'll help you build the event program. We'll help share the videos and help you make sure that you can translate almost everything that you could take from an in-person event onto the virtual side of things. And so there's so much I can say about this, but like Valerie was saying, it's really been an incredible, just like a very this year has been full of awe, like just of everybody adapting to the internet and adapting to getting online and just seeing everyone, you know, even though it's not their first choice, like just going in with an open mind and being really receptive to, even though this, like I said, even though this isn't the first choice, it can still be a choice that's very meaningful and that can bring a lot of intimacy to something like a memorial event, and a lot more creative too, which I love.
I think it's wonderful.
Thank you for, go ahead, Valerie.
A lot of times, logistics, you know, when you're planning a funeral, and I know we went through that this year with my family. I had an aunt and an uncle that died this year. And it was so hard, even in ordinary circumstances, to be out of state and have to
Yeah.
be sad because you weren't there, and then compounded this year with you know, my aunts and uncles are all, you know, 70s, 80s, and you know, all the cousins are like, we're not putting Uncle John on a plane even if we could. So to
Totally.
have, you know, this
Yeah.
platform is really, it's amazing.
Yeah, and whether you have an in-person event and you have a couple of cameras, and really you don't need anything, you don't need any extra equipment, like a phone, a smartphone, a tablet, they can work just fine for as cameras. And oh, there's so much. I had a loss in my family as well in June, and it was like, yeah, of course you're not going to get, there's certain people that are here in Vancouver that aren't able to fly out to Ontario. And, you know, even in Ontario, there's restrictions on how many people can be there. And we had neighbors that were streaming in, like, as long as you have a Zoom link and the right time zone and some internet, you can really stream from anywhere, anytime. I was telling Laura and Abigail earlier, I've seen people stream from cars, boats, you know, like, or just hooking up the computer to their TV and sitting on lazy boys, and this format is just so, like, it can be so interactive. Like, if the four of us were part of a memorial service right now, like, I could be the moderator, and Valerie, like, if we're doing something semi-religious, like, Valerie could do a reading, Abigail could say a poem, Laura could be our first person during the open share, like the open microphone, and it's all moderated by someone that's not you. Like, you don't have to worry about the technical things. You don't have to worry about, you know, making sure everyone's muted, playing the music at the right time. And it can just be like you know, you sit back and you enjoy hearing the stories, and it's almost like watching a documentary about someone's life. Like, it's all just them 100%. And from, like, I've played Nessun Dorma by Jeff Beck at the beginning of memorial events, or, you know, done slideshows to Uptown Funk. I'm kind of getting into another little tangent, but I think that having memorials online has just opened up this world of creativity now for people. It's just like, just burst it wide open. Like, there are no more rules anymore. You don't have to do things the way that they've always been done, which is really, really exciting.
Which is great, because one of the reasons that Allison and I started the group that we started, which is MBC Grieving Together, is that for those of us in the MBC community, we will become very close very, very quickly with people that we may never, ever meet in person. Right. And so then we've got this weird disenfranchised grief thing going on, which Allison introduced me to, because we're separated physically in a lot of ways from the what's normal anymore, right? But kind of the traditional grief rituals, the ones, Christina, that you were saying haven't changed in, you know, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But having something online and having the ability to connect in this way online offers a different opportunity for people to connect. I also remember flying to my grandfather's funeral at the last minute and like running from, you know, connections. And I think we arrived like right as the funeral was beginning, which was, you know, 24 hours of crazy traveling, which was not, this was years ago, but that's not a great way to begin the grieving process, is this rushed travel piece, right? But having something online totally takes some of that away. So I do want to get to your slide deck and some of your pictures, Christina, but I wanted to throw it back to Valerie. And as a death doula, as you're walking through this process of someone in the family transitioning, what are some of the things that you do for people that you work with as a death doula? I know the answer is whatever they need, but maybe you could give us some examples.
Sure. I actually am, you know, I consider myself responsible for asking the hard questions or having the uncomfortable conversations. You know, the very simple question, have you chosen a funeral home? Now, you would think these are generally, you know, on hospice patients. Some are of an age, they're very elderly. And you would maybe not be surprised, but how often, no, we haven't picked one. Do you have an idea where? In the scheme of things with the operations of hospice, generally you don't necessarily have to have arrangements made, but you absolutely need to know which funeral home you want to work with, so that at the time of death, that's, as the nurse, we have to call them to come and take the body under their care. And, I was with a woman recently she was actively dying, and the daughter and the granddaughter seemed like they had it all together, but they didn't. And the granddaughter said, well, oh yeah, I'm going to call tomorrow. Well, why don't you call today? The worst thing you ever want is someone to die in the middle of the night. And I've had that happen where they didn't have any plans. And I don't know who they thought or what was going to happen. It wasn't a patient I saw regularly. I was on call. So yeah, and then you had these young daughters in their 20s trying to figure out what to do. And money was very much an issue. And trying to get information and trying to make decisions. Their father had just died, and he's still here, and it's just heartbreaking. So that's really always very important to me, even if I've never met them before and I just won't ever see them again. I kind of gently phrase those questions. It's really, I wish there was a cookie cutter answer to this. I could tell stories for days, but it's just no. Let's see, I'm trying to think of things that are common underlying themes. Just being okay from the outside with yourselves. Many, many times, vast majority of the time, if hospices are doing their jobs, the patients are fine. They're comfortable. They're doing the natural thing. The body is shutting down, and a lot of times they're not responsive. And it's to the, especially difficult for the very hands-on caregivers that maybe have cared for years and the care was very involved. And now there's nothing to really do. And it's so much our nature to nurture, to, do, and just to have a purpose, and just giving them permission that it's okay to just, and I always say, doing nothing is harder than doing something. It's okay to sit back. It's okay. Yeah, and just taking advantage of that precious time, that sacred time, to really have conversations. And I'm usually in a position to where we'll reframe things and reminisce, and it's really amazing. It's almost, I sometimes joke, it's like almost like, if we're doing our jobs right, it's almost like a Hallmark movie, where you see the grown kids who don't talk much or have issues. And I think I shared last time too, I always see a family, even with grown adult children, no matter what their age, I always see them as their childhood selves, and to see the dynamics, even as grown adults with their own children. It's just trying to meet them where they're at from that angle, because they are at their most vulnerable time, losing a loved one, and all those beliefs that we formed as children, come to the surface. And some people don't act right. They might be grumpy, grouchy, irritable, weepy, on the whole spectrum. But yeah, just meeting them where they're at.
Valerie, I think that's a really good point.
Oh yes, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
One of the things that I can appreciate too, as I'm listening to you, is right, if we're these 20-year-olds, as you were giving in your example, we don't want to call a funeral home. There's some level of denial of the reality that we're going through. And I think one of the things that is coming to light every other Sunday as we talk more and more about these services is trying to normalize the conversation and make it, have it be positioned as something that we are able to talk about, and not necessarily bury our head in the sand. And one question I have actually for Abigail before we turn things back over to Christina. Abigail, you're talking about these relationships we forge with people and we never actually like physically meet them necessarily, right? We know all about their treatment plans. We know all about their families, every single intimate piece that they're going through, maybe even sometimes more so than their family members know, because we can be the sounding boards for the venting and the fear, the anxiety. How does that manifest and play out when someone does pass away in the MBC community? You may not be invited to the funeral because their family does not know that there was even a relationship there. So as we talk about this grief and maybe this opportunity through Zoom, how do we find that closure?
It's such a great question. And that's actually, I think, one of the main questions I've been grappling with here in 2020. As some of you are listening may remember, Emily Garnett was a dear, dear friend of mine. And we met one time in person in Washington, D.C. last October, in 19. Not this past October, obviously. And she died in March of this year. So she was it was the beginning of the end in a lot of ways when she was in DC in October, because that's right after that was when she was diagnosed with leptomeningeal Mets, which is when the metastases gets into your spinal fluid, cerebrospinal fluid. And that right now, that type of metastases has the most difficult prognosis. And so there was some time to talk about death, and we talked about death a lot. But it wasn't that particular experience that made such an impact on me, because her husband has been amazing at grieving very publicly and remembering her and talking about her. My first experience with grief in the MBC community was with a young woman. Her name was Carrie, and she and I were connected through a group that I now admin as Sister Buddies. And the whole idea of the program is to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks, right? So the group has a little over 2,000 people in it. There's no way that I or my co-admin could keep up with everybody's stories and all of the things that they're struggling with. And so we pair people up. So Carrie was my first sister buddy, and we talked a lot, and she died and her Facebook profile disappeared. And I'm sure that was what she wanted. I'm sure her family was following her wishes, but because I had only really ever interacted with her via Facebook Messenger, we had never exchanged phone numbers. And so while I knew a lot about her, I didn't know her family at all. And so I was left with this like, okay, wait a minute, this person is dead. I was close to her. I'm grieving, but like I don't have access to even pictures to remember her by, because that Facebook profile had been taken down. And so that was kind of lingering for me. That was in 2019 that happened. And so then when Emily died, I was just like, wait a second, this has happened again. Like I was not as close to other people when they passed away. And so one of the big things we've done is create the Facebook group where we all talk about the people that we've lost, where we share the grief among each other, and also keep it private so that the families can be the first ones to post on Facebook, or the families can be the first ones to make those announcements. And as Facebook memories pop up, we'll share them in that group and talk about what it means to have lost somebody. But there's this other layer to that, and it's the triggering element of that person. Like in the case with Emily, we literally have the exact same subtype. We were diagnosed around the same age and in a very, very, very similar way. And so when you start to see these people whose experiences mirror your own, that creates a whole lot of, I don't know what you want to call it, existential angst. It's kind of okay, that means I'm next, or it's coming. I think it's just that wake up call. But then, as we've discussed, that has been a lot of the impetus for then making plans of our own. And as different people in the community have died, and done so pretty publicly. We had a young lady who took advantage of medical aid in dying, and her last 2 weeks, she posted every single day in our group and just talked about, as she was nearing that date, how she was feeling, how her family was feeling. And she really modeled for us that process. And so I think that, to me, is really a big hallmark of the MBC community, in that we share very generously of ourselves. But then I had somebody local die a few weeks ago, and, you know, going to her funeral, which was in person and with masks and socially distanced and super weird and couldn't hug anybody. And, you know, just understanding that this is a very, very different time, and creating different grief rituals, which really was part of the idea of MBC Grieving Together, is what are grief rituals that are unique to the MBC community, which we're still trying to figure that out. Which is why I want to go back to Christina to talk about the mechanics, show us some pictures. How does this virtual online grieving stuff, how does it work?
You should have seen me furiously writing down notes. I was like, through everything that you were saying, I was like, oh my goodness, yes. It's so back to what you said something really interesting about, like, being able to, you know, like, how do you become a part, like, you are a part of somebody's life, but you're not invited to the funeral, a part of their life. Like, I was having this pre-COVID, like, how do you encourage people to come when they don't feel like they're, you know, part of that inner circle, if you will. And I found that one of the really amazing things about streaming and about doing this Zoom thing these days is just, you, no matter who you are, you can, as long as you have a link, like, you can be a part of that. And even if you are if you feel like you would describe yourself as a very small part of someone's life, you can still click that button. You can still be almost like a little, I wrote voyeur-ish. Like, you can still be, you can still watch, and you can still, in the comfort of your own home, and just beyond a screen. Like, if it's on Zoom, you can turn your video off if it's live streamed. Like, I did that for my mom's godfather last week, and it was like, you know, you're watching the church, and you can be there without being there, and you can still have a little part of being present. And the best part about the Zoom experience, I'm finding, is that you can, even when someone's video is off, you can see, it's almost like you're in a circle, rather than everyone is facing one way and not interacting with each other. Like, there's the chat box, there's, you know, turning your video on, there's always a moment. So getting back to the mechanics, at the very beginning of the event, so 15 minutes before, we usually have some music that's the family's choosing however you want to start the event. And of course, it's whatever you feel comfortable with. Again, Nessun Dorma to Andrea Bocelli's The Prayer, to Adagio in G, to Paco Bell's Canon. And then there's usually an order of events. So it's kind of like that digital program. And then at the very beginning, like, a brief technical introduction. And sometimes what I like to do is encourage people to turn their screens to gallery view. And so hopefully this translates the same way on Facebook Live, but it's right here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. For people on a laptop, they can press the view button, or there's different instructions for an iPad or an iPhone, but we encourage everybody to try it out and to take a moment to see everybody who's in the room, and to see everybody who's kind of joined us here today, whether it is a hybrid event, like I call it, or entirely virtual. Like, take a moment to wave, take a moment to, like, get really close to the screen and see, you know, even though you can't see any better, like, see the intricate details in Valerie's background, and see people, you know, in the back, and have that moment where you're pointing. And of course, you don't know exactly, like, who's pointing at what, but just to have that moment all together, and kind of be present with each other, and you're here in this experience. And then, going through the program however it's intended. We would do that beforehand. So we would work with families to do their ideal order of events, and whether it's led by a celebrant, led by someone in the family as the master of ceremonies. I've done fully Catholic masses, and I'll show you a couple pictures. So what I've done is I've done a little bit of I've done a couple presentations before, and I'm just going to go a little bit like all around, but this is what a technical introduction looks like. So, you know, welcoming the guests, as I was saying, it's usually me on screen or someone on the team. And then this was the Catholic Mass that I was talking about. So I find that with Zoom and with virtual events, it can go in definitely in shades of religion. So it doesn't have to be if you're Catholic, but you're not practicing Catholic, there are different elements that you can bring in. So whether it's a priest in the full outfit, or the cassock, I believe it is, or the you know, just having prayers on the screen or little hymns. There's different ways that you can bring in elements of religion or elements of spirituality and elements of ritual. And actually the ritual, it's great that you said that, Abigail. So one of my dearest friends, Megan Sheldon, is one half of a company called Seeking Ceremony with Kate Love, and they're based in Canada. And this is on the left-hand side. For those of you listening, on the left-hand side of my screen, there's an image. In the foreground, it's a candle, a lit candle, and then in the background, you can see a blurred computer screen with lots of Zoom faces, so Zoom in gallery view. And you can just see really the Zoom screen. It's like we're all part of this one intimate moment all together, and it's a candle lighting, and it's just we can take a moment and all light our candles at the same time and just be together. And again, switching to gallery view on Zoom to be together, to see everybody in that one moment. On the right-hand side of the screen, a different kind of celebrant-led service. It's a picture of a funeral home, and there are some chairs that are placed, there's a TV at the front of the room, and there are chairs in the room as well. And so you can't see it here, but during the event, they had a casket up at the front, and we had an iPad that was positioned at the casket to almost allow for a virtual viewing and a virtual visitation. And for some families, like I'm part of a very Catholic family, the visitation is a very important ritual to us, and this is a way that we can incorporate that. And whether it doesn't have to be a part of the actual service. So if the service, say, starts at 10, you can have a virtual visitation from, say, 9 to 10 or 9:30 to 10, and just have that laid out in the program. So if anybody would like to log in and to watch, they can certainly do that, but they're not obliged. And then of course on the computer you see two different screenshots. On the left is just a still image of a pre-recorded video, and on the right it's just the gallery view. So you see almost like Brady Bunch view for people who aren't used to gallery view in Zoom is, but it's like the Brady Bunch, and you can see all these videos all at once, and there are 2 or 3 people in each portion of the screen, and you can, again, it's like being in a circle all together. And then the group activities or the group rituals, they can be anything from, you know, the candle lighting, or Megan has this, Megan from Seeking Ceremony has this great ritual where they all bring an object that reminds you of the person and of our honoree, and you're all encouraged to hold it up to the screen and take a moment in gallery view to see everybody's objects, and you're welcome to write it in the chat as well. But also this is a variation of that, where our honoree was known for his love of $2 bills, and so everybody was encouraged to bring a $2 bill and hold it up to the screen and, you know, wave it around. And so you see people with like all these $2 bills, and they're waving to each other, and it's yeah, just using these tools to your advantage. So using things like gallery view, using things like playing music over the speakers is just so great. It's such a new opportunity that we would not have had if we were all together in person. Not to say, like, you know, if you were in person, you'd have to wear, you know, like a skirt that doesn't fit really well, or you know, like itchy tights, or shoes that are, you know, too uncomfortable and have to walk in heels. But here, you just, as long as you're dressed from, you know, from the waist up, the joke is that you can attend a memorial in any kind of outfit. I have seen somebody wear a blazer on top and board shorts on the bottom. So it was a sport jacket, a tie, a button-up shirt, and then he got up because it was really hot. It was July, and had like these Hawaiian board shorts. And so that's it was fun.
At least he was wearing something on the bottom.
Totally. Or you know what? If you're not wearing anything. Yeah.
Right. Before we move on, the last slide, it said something about hand holding. And I know we were talking about this a little bit before we got started. Talk about that, because I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So the four of us can do this right now. And for those listening on the podcast, I'll explain how to do it. So if you, at the beginning, you first, whoever your facilitator is or your master of ceremonies can take a moment and ask everyone to go into gallery view. So explaining how to go into gallery view. Now that we're all there, you ask all of your attendees to hold their hands up in front of them, like so. So I'm holding my hands up in front of me, and that I'll take a screenshot if all four of us can do it. So if Valerie, all four of us will hold our hands up to the screen, and then one at a time, start with your left hand and kind of position it so that it's on the outside of your video box. And so it's like your palms are facing out. So it's like and it always takes a minute or two, like for everybody to figure out how to do it with their own screen. But having someone take these screenshots in the background, and so I'm screenshotting 1, 2, 3, and perfect. I've got a few. So yeah, the idea is everyone's holding their hands up at either side of the video. So it simulates a hand holding. And thank you so much for bringing that back up again, because it's like I was saying before we started this, it's a very low barrier way to feel all connected together. Like you don't have to bring anything. There's no special skills required. You can be walked through how to change your view, how to turn on your video, how to make it so that, you get this effect. But my favorite part of it is that it's almost never perfect. You have people holding their hands up right in front of them, like palms facing the video. You have people, trying to figure it out. You have two people together holding each other's hands and interpreting it that way. But it's perfectly imperfect. Yeah. As I say, and there's so many ways that you can get so creative. Like for an in-person event, you could never pre-record a video and have it shown and be there at the same time. Well, you could, but it would just feel weirder than, you can pre-record a video and you can have it playing, have your technician play it. I encourage people to pre-record a video if there's a special place that meant a lot to your honoree, or if your mom loved going hiking on a certain trail, take your phone and film a little video, and we can play that at that time. Or you can even introduce your own video. Or I've had families do collages of different their own edited videos, and we play that. So their own family tributes, and they've interviewed different members of the family, and they've had little video, pictures, and you see video editors in the family. And that's another way that people can get creative to do these tributes. And as long as we have them beforehand, we can just play them anytime. It's incredible. It is incredible. It's yeah.
A variation I experienced not too long ago on the candles. I'm not sure if you do this, but we were also on Zoom in a gallery view with candles. And if you didn't have candles, people were utilizing flashlights. But the extra thing, the moderator was saying, can everyone in their room dim their lights? So it kind of, in this gallery view, everything kind of turned dark, brownish, blackish, and it almost looked like you were at one of these stadiums where everyone's holding their lighter up and everything.
Oh wow!
And then thinking of that, taking your idea of building that immediate sense of community, that your entire Zoom screen has all of these dark lit faces and candles and everything. It was really powerful.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good idea. And yeah. Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. Yeah. If you're able to, please dim the lights. And of course, having someone in the background, like we have someone on our team taking screenshots at the same time, because Zoom, we record all of our events, which is another unintended benefit. Because, you know, if someone can't make it, then they can you can share the recording with them. Or even if you want to watch it again, I was always a proponent for filming memorials before COVID, but now with Zoom, it's pre-recorded. You let everybody know that it's recorded, and you get all of that in real time, like just on camera and able to share instantly. But the best part is that, yeah, is how you can get creative and watching that back again. And another really nice idea that I've facilitated is having almost like a virtual garden. So I remember Laura and Abigail, I was telling you beforehand, but everybody brings their favorite flower or a plant or something to hold up to the screen, and you have a moment of all of this foliage. And for one family that we helped recently, they played Ed Sheeran's Supermarket Flowers, which is a really touching and meaningful song to their family. And it was like not a dry eye in the house, my friends. Like everybody's in tears. It was so beautiful. And just having that moment of being able to watch it back and to watch everybody holding up their flowers. And then I helped another family where there was a mom, her favorite color were like fall colors, and her favorite color was tan. And so everyone was encouraged to wear tan. And so, you know, you have a moment to see and be seen in your best beige. Those beige colors. Yeah.
It's such a great thought and concept to have people doing something similar in their own home that brings them together, because isn't that what a memorial really is meant to do? It's to bring everybody together with the focus on honoring someone. And I love how you keep calling the person who has died the honoree. It just kind of takes the sting out of the fact that, you know, the only reason you're doing these things is because somebody has died. So just going back to this whole idea that language is so important, and using the right language is so important. But
taking the cue from the family of what you'd like to call it. Like, how would you like us to refer? I know that's a big thing for Gathering Us and for New Narrative. It's like, how do you want us to refer? Do you want it to be a memorial, or is it a celebration of life, or is it a remembrance? And, you know, all of the graphics and everything that we put together are reflective of that. Because again, it's like Valerie was saying, it's meeting you where you are, and whether it's you want to have Uptown Funk and an 80s celebration of life, or it's, you know, a very sudden death that it's a specific kind of tone, and you're very sad, and you want to sit in that, and that's okay. Like, everything is okay. And yeah, it's the spectrum of grief is very, very strange. And, you know, it's like Valerie was saying earlier, that some people, you know, sometimes you're happy and sometimes you're very angry, and it's like, it can change, you know, you can be very scattered. And so having a company to work with you and to help you talk through some of these ideas, and to, like, we got all the technical stuff. Like, here's the little creative assignments that you can do, like pick some songs, and giving permission for you to be creative.
That's great.
I went on a few different.
Thank you. That's okay. No, I mean, I think the main idea, or the bottom line that I'm taking away from this discussions, is just that there's no wrong answers. That it's really just in terms of what's appropriate for your particular family or the honoree that has passed. And Valerie, I wanted to come back to you just to talk about how does being a death doula work in times of COVID? Have you had to shift to do a lot more of your work online?
Yes, I've channeled this year almost all of my leftover energies from my day job into working with Dying Your Way program. It's basically an online program that you journey through the portal program. It's 10 modules, and you ultimately will create your own end-of-life plan. It's very educational and, you know, purposeful. So we've been working really hard on that, not just individually for folks, but also revamping it a bit to where we are going to be launching it to be used within organizations. So we're going to be piloting that in the new year, which is really, really great. I love it because it's not just for the patient themselves, but it can be for the family, caregivers, friends, professionals, and, basically an avenue for one to address their end of life plans, and even just if it at the very minimum provokes thoughts and conversations. It's a wonderful thing. There's a free ebook that can be downloaded at the website. It's just dyingyourway.com. That's really been my highlight of this year, is working with my Dying Your Way family. Talk about Zoom. They're in Australia right now, the co-founders, husband and wife, Claire O'Berry and Terry Mepham, and she's from Texas, but he's from Australia. So she made it over there right before the lockdown and all that. So yeah, it's just the
Wow.
virtual closeness. It's really nice. We Zoom a lot. So that's been really great. But in person, it's really, really heartbreaking. People are actually, earlier this year, it's gotten better now, but declining the hospice team visits, let alone having an end of life doula or person. I haven't had any actual clients myself this year on that level, but I do have a friend that journeyed with a family, husband and wife and their children, and she became part of their inner circle, a safe person. And so being mindful of the things that she did and where she went and all that, always knowing, but so she was still able to operate normally. But yeah, even, we all know the facilities aren't even letting family members in, and that's still going on. So that's been really difficult to be on standby for that. They're even, again, not even letting some of the nursing, the hospice nursing staff that ordinarily go in and out of facilities to check on their patients and be part of their plan of cares. And so that's been really sad that they haven't, people that were actually actively dying, we couldn't even send the chaplain in or social worker in for visits and stuff. So I did want to say
So much
for
has
Christina,
changed.
that just to backtrack a bit, or Christina's adventures, that the two things that sell it for me is the two number one reasons that people probably generally avoid going to funerals and things is there's always somebody there that you don't particularly want to run into. Now you don't have to. And and what's the other? Ugly crying. If you're ugly crying, you can just hide your screen.
Yeah, I think I said a couple months ago that like the stop video is the version of the sunglasses at the funeral. Like instead of just stop your video and and you don't have
Fix
to
your face and come back.
Yeah, or like get a snack and come back, get some water. You can use the slideshow to do whatever you need to do. And a lot of people do toasts, and so having a chance to when it comes to the people that you don't want to run into, sometimes we do get families. It is easier to be a bouncer for a virtual event, because if you see somebody, like I have a direct communication with the families, usually via text, and if they have a specific name, or they see someone on screen and they're like, this person, this username, please don't, if they raise their hand, please pass them over for the open share. They can still share in the chat, but don't want to hear from them. Or they tend to go on long, then we can definitely do that. And it's discreetly the person that you don't want to run into, or accidentally muting someone a little too early, or there's little tricks that we have, especially during that open share, to get to make sure that it's less obvious. And so and you don't have to encounter these people if you don't want to. But and then on the flip side, people that you haven't seen for months and months and months, some families like to have a little reception after. And I just, for me, every company does it a little differently, but I just give the hosting to the family and just let them be there and let everybody unmute their microphones. Or I will do what I call the great unmuting. I'll just unmute all, and then someone coughs, and then their camera goes to them accidentally, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean for the camera to go to me. But then like Jim from Florida is like, oh my God, howdy, like I haven't seen you in forever. How are you doing? And then everybody just starts talking with each other. So it's very, very, very nice. Very nice to have a moderator.
That's
but yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's so wonderful. And just thinking about funerals that I've been to where there was that person who couldn't come, or there was some reason that, the flight got canceled or the whatever changed, and how this methodology or this platform just takes away those logistics or the logistical issues that become an issue. So we've hit 5 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah.
So we're going to be winding down, but what I'm going to do is go back to each of you one more time just to share any last thoughts. And then, as I warned you, I'm going to come to you with a question about a word that describes what we've talked about today, something to leave our listeners with. So Valerie, can we start with you? Any last thoughts that you want to share? I'm not calling you for your word yet. You can still think about that.
One of the things, advocating for hospice and educating about hospice myths and misconceptions and all those things. One of the number one responses, I usually run into with folks is we wish we knew about it sooner. It's not very few people take advantage of hospice as early as they become eligible. They usually wait for some defining sign or situation, and then they become ready psychosocially to take advantage of that benefit. So I just want to say to Christina that I wish I knew about you sooner. Our family we really struggled this year with the logistic factors and not being able to do that. And I know it's something my very dynamic cousin would have taken full advantage of. She even talked about the family in New York, and then she was in Georgia, having one of the cousins and like renting a van and driving the older folks down. Like, she's really creative in that way. And so I know she would have jumped on this. I'm sad of that, but I will be glad to share.
Christina, over to you. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely feel like as this evolves, what I think is going to happen next year, just with the evolution of the virtual memorial, and just a really great way to encapsulate what this is and what the virtual platform is capable of, is when you do have an in-person event of however many, whether it's like 5, 10, 50. I did an event recently where we Zoomed some people in and we had a TV at the front of the front. And I think that 2021 is just going to be a year full of asking your 80-year-old master of ceremonies in person to introduce the TV, and to introduce the person on TV coming in for Zoom. And that just shows you can have people, like, have it so interactive and almost like be there at the same time. Like, it can be very interactive, and that it doesn't have to feel like a plan B is something that my friend Megan Sheldon has said so many times that I love. It's like, it doesn't have to feel like a plan. It can be a plan A, and we can bring lots of intention and lots of personalization to this process.
I have a feeling that so many things are just never going to go back to normal, whatever that is. I think that we're going to see so many of these virtual type, I'm not going to say alternative things. It's really just other and different and even sometimes richer opportunities. Personally, I love the fact that my husband has been able to work from home all this time, because he's spending so much more quality time with our kids. So anyway, I think that a lot of those working from home, or these things where you don't have to drive all the way to the doctor's office for a telemedicine appointment. I've been telling all my doctors, keep this around. I like this. They show up on time for all of the telemedicine appointments, which is kind of amazing. So Valerie, kind of come back to you for your word. What word would would you use to describe our conversation today?
This word kind of jumped out at me early on. I don't know. It's I responsibility. I really feel that you two ladies in particular have really, changed my outlook. As much as I think I've known and seen and done, it's not too often that I've ever run into people dealing with real life issues and still having not just the courage, but taking on the responsibility of mentoring others, accompanying others, being there for others, educating others. And I just think that's pretty amazing. And I think as human beings, we all should be taking responsibility for our roles in life and handling our business so that our loved ones are not tasked with that.
Such a great reminder. Yes. I've shared before, because both of my grandfathers have passed away. My maternal grandfather passed away first, and their estate planning documents had fallen down behind a filing cabinet, and they had nothing planned. So my grandmother and my uncle had to do it, this gigantic event in just a few days and all of that. Contrasted with my paternal grandfather, who had everything down to, like, they had bought the insurance policy to fly his body from Florida back to Ohio. Everything was paid in advance. All my grandmother had to do was buy her plane ticket and show up. And having the experience of seeing those very disparate outcomes of either not planning or planning, it really drove home to me that the plans that we can make and put in place so our loved ones don't have to, it really seems like the kind of the last gesture or the last expression of love to our families, by, like you said, taking care of our own business. I like that, Valerie. Thank you for sharing. Christina, what word jumps out at you from our discussions today?
Oh, this has been at first I was going to say gratitude, because of course, like, just talking with all of you and being on this brand new platform, like, I haven't, as a service provider in this realm, you network with a lot of other service providers, but like not a lot of communities like this. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I'm also very invigorated and very ready to go and ready to spread I feel a sense of responsibility too, like letting people know that this is an option, and really the destigmatizing the whole online thing. Like, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, it's been very, very invigorating for me. So thank you so much.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I think anytime you have a community who is proactive and wanting to start thinking through these things rather than doing things at the last minute, it really is a completely different conversation.